A single creature once ruled Earth so effectively that it rewrote the balance of entire ecosystems long before dinosaurs ever took their first step. This was not Tyrannosaurus rex, the famous giant of the Cretaceous, but something far older, something forged in a world that no longer exists. Around 265 million years ago, during the Middle Permian period, the planet was dominated by a predator called Pampophonius bicae. Its existence pushes the limits of what we imagine when we think of prehistoric danger, because it lived in a world that predates dinosaurs by tens of millions of years, and it ruled that world without challenge. Its discovery in what is now southern Brazil didn't just add another species to the fossil record. It exposed an entire era of Earth's history where predators like this were not exceptions, they were the standard. The Earth at that time was vastly different. Continents were fused into the supercontinent Pangaea, forming a massive landmass that stretched from pole to pole. Climate patterns were extreme, ecosystems were fragile, and evolutionary experimentation was at its peak. Life was rebuilding itself after earlier mass extinctions, and the dominant players in this landscape were not dinosaurs, but early synapsids, creatures that would eventually give rise to mammals. Among these early synapsids, one group stood above the rest, the dinocephalians, meaning terrible heads. Pampophonius belonged to this group, and its name translated as killer of the pampas reflects its role in the ecosystem. It was not a scavenger. It was not a secondary predator. It was an apex hunter at the top of its food chain. Fossil evidence suggests Pampophonius measured around 3 meters in length and weighed several hundred kilograms. That alone places it among the larger predators of its time. But size was only part of its dominance. Its skull reveals a weaponized biology: thick bones, reinforced jaws, and long, curved canine teeth designed to grip, puncture, and hold struggling prey. Unlike modern big cats, which rely on suffocation or throat bites, Pampophonius likely used brute force and bone-crushing power. Its bite wasn't just about killing, it was about overwhelming resistance. In an environment filled with armored herbivores and competing carnivores, survival required absolute control over prey. But what makes Pampophonius truly extraordinary is not just what it was, it is when it lived. This predator existed before dinosaurs, before T-Rex, before even the earliest ancestors of birds took flight. The dinosaur era, which dominates popular imagination, would not begin for another 35 million years. That means Pampophonius ruled a planet that would later become completely unrecognizable. The ecosystems it lived in were populated by creatures that have no modern equivalent. Large amphibians dominated wetlands. Early reptiles roamed land and water. Other synapsids, some the size of small cars, competed for survival. It was a world in flux, where evolutionary paths were still being tested. In this environment, Pampophonius stood at the top. Its discovery in Brazil provides more than just a glimpse of one species. It reveals that these predators were not isolated. Similar creatures existed across Pangaea, from what is now Russia to South Africa. This widespread presence shows that dinocephalians were a global force, not a regional anomaly. For millions of years, they were among the most successful land animals on Earth. But success in evolutionary history is always temporary. Now comes the moment that changes everything. Around 252 million years ago, Earth experienced the most devastating extinction event in its history, the Permian-Triassic extinction, often called the Great Dying. During this event, approximately 90% of all species disappeared. Oceans collapsed into toxic environments. Atmospheric conditions changed dramatically. Entire ecosystems were erased in what can only be described as a planetary reset. And creatures like Pampophonius, dominant, powerful, seemingly unstoppable, vanished. Not because they were weak, but because the world itself collapsed. Massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia released enormous quantities of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, triggering rapid global warming. Ocean oxygen levels dropped. Acid rain fell across vast regions. The food chains that supported large predators broke apart. Pampophonius, like so many other dominant species, could not adapt quickly enough to survive this new reality. And in that moment, the age of synapsid dominance ended. The stage was cleared for something entirely new. From the chaos of extinction, dinosaurs began to rise. Over the next tens of millions of years, dinosaurs evolved into a staggering variety of forms. Among them emerged some of the largest and most powerful predators to ever walk the earth: Allosaurus, Spinosaurus, and eventually, the most iconic of all, Tyrannosaurus rex. T-Rex, which lived around 66 million years ago, was a different kind of predator. Measuring up to 12 meters long, with a skull filled with massive, banana-sized teeth, it relied on an incredibly powerful bite force, among the strongest ever recorded in a terrestrial animal. But here is the critical truth. By the time T-Rex existed, Pamphiliosaurus had already been extinct for over 190 million years. That means when dinosaurs were still evolving, when ecosystems were still forming after the Permian extinction, Pamphiliosaurus was already part of ancient history. Its reign belonged to a world long gone. Yet the legacy it left behind is profound. Pamphiliosaurus belongs to the same broader lineage that would eventually lead to mammals, and ultimately, to humans. It represents a branch of life that survived extinction, adapted, and evolved through unimaginable challenges. In many ways, the survival of its lineage is just as important as its dominance. Because if that lineage had failed, mammals might never have emerged. And without mammals, there would be no humans. This single predator, then, is not just a relic of a forgotten age, it is part of the foundation of everything that exists today. Its fossils, uncovered in Brazil, are more than bones. They are evidence of a lost world, one that operated under completely different rules. A world where giant synapsid predators ruled, where ecosystems were structured differently, and where survival depended on power, adaptability, and timing. But even this is only a fragment of a much larger story. Because the deeper we look into Earth's history, the more we realize how incomplete our understanding truly is. There were entire ecosystems in Earth's deep past that disappeared without leaving behind a complete record. Whole worlds of life once thrived, complex, balanced, and self-sustaining, yet today, we only glimpse fragments of them through scattered fossils and partial remains. Many species existed for millions of years, adapting, evolving, and dominating their environments, but their stories survive only in broken pieces of stone. Some of the most powerful predators ever to walk the earth vanished so completely that we may never fully understand how they lived or why they disappeared. Among these forgotten rulers was Pamphiliosaurus, a formidable predator from the Middle Permian period. It stood at the top of its ecosystem, a dominant force in a time long before dinosaurs. If Earth was capable of producing a predator like this, an animal strong enough to dominate its entire environment, what else might have existed? What other creatures once ruled ecosystems that no longer exist? And perhaps more importantly, what remains hidden beneath layers of rock, still waiting to be discovered by scientists in the future? Earth's history is not a smooth or continuous path. Entire species, ecosystems, and even dominant groups have been erased by mass extinction events, climate shifts, and geological changes. In this vast timeline, no species remains at the top forever. Pamphiliosaurus serves as a reminder of this truth. It shows that the idea of being at the top of the food chain is temporary. Dominance in nature is not permanent, it is fleeting, shaped by environmental conditions that can change without warning. Even the most powerful creatures are ultimately vulnerable to forces beyond their control. Today, humanity occupies the position of dominance on Earth. But history suggests that this position is not guaranteed. This leads to a deeper, more unsettling thought. If such powerful creatures once existed and disappeared, and if entire ecosystems can rise and vanish, then the question is not only what came before but what comes after. What future species, environments, or forces might eventually take the place of what dominates today? Because in the long story of Earth, the ending is not written. It is still unfolding. Not everything is meant to be seen at once. Subscribe to continue.